everyone, welcome. Quick ask, my colleague here is Dutch. He will be presenting half this presentation to you. If you'd rather have it in Dutch, his piece, because I'm very English and I don't have Dutch as a language, please raise your hand. So, most people are happy with English, so it's your decision, Oren. I'm speaking first, just to explain who I am, because my name is up on the board in front of you. I am Simon Briggs. I work as the very highly titled EMEA Cloud Technical Strategist at SUSE. That just means I work on the product lines which particularly related to the public and the private cloud. Obviously, the private cloud, our main product line is OpenStack based. SUSE OpenStack Cloud is its name. Quickly explain, sometimes I shorten that in presentations to SOC as an acronym. If you see SOC, please read SUSE OpenStack Cloud. We're going to talk to you about integrating VMware in with SUSE OpenStack Cloud and the challenges you might experience there. And first of all, my colleague here is going to talk to you about the business sense behind why you should do that. And then I'll go into the more technical pitfalls, things to think of, ideas, as a second section. So,
thank you. So my name is Orhan Alissi. I'm the sales engineer within the Benelux, responsible for, amongst other things, OpenStack, Enterprise Linux, but also software-defined storage. Today on the agenda, of course, about OpenStack and the integration with VMware. So, starting from this morning, we talked about OpenStack. And as you have maybe heard earlier, it is not a matter of when or if you are going to use OpenStack, it's more when to use OpenStack. Because it's already for years available, it's now mature for production. And if you lose the inflection point, then you will maybe get into trouble when you have to deliver very quick and very agile services to your customer. So it's not about nice to have, it's about must have. And as my colleague Simon told earlier, we are not going only talk about infrastructure. The customer is more interested in your services, how fast and how agile you are, but also how robust and how available your environment is, because based on your service, you will get your SLAs and, of course, whether your customer is happy or not. Having said that, and given the new era we are now living with towards the software-defined data center, one of the parts is, of course, the infrastructure, compute, storage, and networking. And then OpenStack comes in. Why? Because that is the next phase of virtualization for your resources, next to your current virtualization. As you know, we do the evolution from coming from the mainframe now until the OpenStack environment with virtualization. And the next step is, of course, Dockerization, etc., etc. So using that kind of technology, your underlying infrastructure must be there and must be robust and also reliable. And software-defined data center implies a software-defined infrastructure, software-defined networking, and software-defined storage. And therefore, OpenStack comes in. If you want to make use of this technology, most of our companies already have massively invested in their current infrastructure. Gartner talks about bi-model IT, the traditional environment, which is based on just bare metal systems, VMware, KVM, Xen, but also the new infrastructure is based on OpenStack, but based on cloud, Internet of Things, but also Dockerization, etc. If you want to use that, you cannot have the position to say, I get rid of all my old material, all my infrastructure and software and my investment, and I'm going to use the newest stuff. Because you have made a lot of investments, you cannot get rid of them. So instead of replacing and saying, I want to have the latest and the greatest software and the hardware, you can take a gradual approach by introducing OpenStack next to your current infrastructure. As we said earlier, you can start small and then grow in the pace which your company requires. So it is unrealistic to say, get rid of all things and start with an OpenStack. And therefore, our experience in the field is that most of our current customers, and I'm a bit curious about you, who's today using VMware? Almost most. Almost all my customers using VMware. If I go to the VMware guys or the architects which are responsible for VMware and I say, hey guys, I have a nice product for you, it's OpenStack and you can do the same, almost the same with VMware, they will laugh about you. Why? They get used to the quality, to all the functionality of VMware. So OpenStack is not direct a replacement in the beginning for a VMware environment. Therefore, you should choose a strategy to say, how can those two environments, OpenStack and VMware, coexist, cooperate in your environment? So what we will do is try to get your traditional IT also live with the OpenStack developments on your VMware environment. And there is where SUSE comes in with our solution, the OpenStack, SUSE OpenStack Cloud 6, SOC 6. We have a beautiful solution for you so that you can incorporate your current VMware environment with the new OpenStack environment. As Jonathan Bryce said in the Austin OpenStack Summit, this is not only seen here, but everywhere. You can't say, I get rid of VMware and do something else. It is a coexistence of both environments. But is OpenStack new and what does it bring? And now I'm a bit confused. What is that, Simon? Can you tell me why we put here an elephant?
Right. When I was setting up these slides, my British nature overpowered me. And in Britain, we talk about something being an elephant in the room. If it's an idea or a concept, everyone knows is a problem, but they don't want to accept it. So you talk politely around the issue. Okay, so what I was doing here was illustrating the fact the elephant in the room is that isn't OpenStack all about cattle? Isn't it all about the new development you're doing in the business? Okay. Apparently it doesn't translate so well into Dutch.
we have another Dutch saying about the elephant. It's not it's different. So we have done a survey, and the survey shows that currently 93% of the OpenStack users are using KVM. Why? It is there. KVM is included in the package, it is included in the Linux operating system, and it is for free. And it's easy. All the development has been done on top of this technology. And only 7% of the respondents said they are using OpenStack on top of VMware ESX servers. This number is at the moment little, but it will grow. Why? We have the excellent integration with OpenStack. If a customer is completely standardized on VMware, we don't push you go to use KVM and other virtualization technology. Make use of your current knowledge and your current investments. But Dockers come also in the game. It's not only about virtualization on the hypervisor layer. The next layer is Docker. So you have to be prepared also to cope with the challenges which Docker comes in this environment. Having said that, the ideal environment for a VMware environment is if you run OpenStack on top of your VMware environment, you can use best of the both worlds. Your current knowledge of VMware can remain, and the new development and the agile development which comes with OpenStack can run on this platform. And I think we have a lot of projects going on. SUSE has the experience and also the consultancy power within EMEA to help you if you want to go for OpenStack in an environment, in a VMware environment, that we will help you to cope with pitfalls or with other troubles before you have to invent the wheel by yourself. what VMware offers. Now we come in a bit technical detail, and then I would like to ask my colleague to help me in this, because he is our specialist and also the strategist within SUSE. And I would like to ask you, can you take it from here? And then when needed, I can help.
No problem. So, yeah, so the nice thing is VMware is there. We had the keynote earlier today that VMware have their own OpenStack. So they get open source and they work in open source. What they actually offer, though, is important to understand, because if you ask me in a meeting and say, this is great, you're offering us this wonderful cloud solution, and what you're offering us is OpenStack-based, will it support a VMware infrastructure? I say yes, but actually the devil's always in the details. So let's walk through what you've got. There is an integration with OpenStack Nova, which allows you to use those compute resources that Nova Service delivers. The VMs can be delivered on the ESXi hypervisor beneath the VMware infrastructure. But it is only beneath the VMware infrastructure, because the integration point for the APIs talks down to vCenter. It's the first point. If anyone's looked at this, this is the first point of challenge. Within the open source world, your OpenStack talks directly to your hypervisor. Okay? Different model here. Your OpenStack's talking to the manager of the hypervisors. Okay? You really need to get your head around that as you're architecting the solution. Okay, it came out with vCenter v4.1, so they have an established pedigree with their API, okay? But actually, in reality, that was an early version, like we're all challenged in the code world. Initially, you start and you learn things very quickly. So in reality, if your infrastructure isn't up to update 1 on 5.1, you're going to be challenged in delivering this service. Now, luckily, I would have thought most of you who raise your hands are running on an estate which is at that level, to be fair. You may scream at me and say, no, I'm on 4.1, but most people I meet are at a higher version, which is good, but you need to know that. If you think about the fact that you're not getting direct access to the hypervisor beneath, it is therefore obvious that OpenStack will only see the VMware resources as a pool of resources. So you might have 20 ESXi hosts, but in OpenStack, it will just have a VMware estate with so much RAM, so much memory, so much CPU. Okay? You've got to start getting your head around that as you're architecting the solution. That's something to understand. Whoops, I'm going outside the lines. And importantly, presently, we're on version 6 of SUSE OpenStack Cloud. That is Liberty release, and the code base at the moment in Liberty is restricted by VMware only supporting one integration point between OpenStack and VMware. So essentially, it's a one-for-one model with a vCenter. Okay? So a lot of my customers, when they have that initial conversation, think, great, I can link this up to all my vCenters. If they've got more than one, that's actually not supported. I'll explain quickly why I'm calling out supported. In the software world, as vendors, we often say things are possible, or we say they're supported. What matters to you as a business is what's supported. So I'm not saying you can't integrate more than one, but you might get into challenges with VMware if you do so. Okay? And therefore, the logic of this is OpenStack manages your images in glance and knows what services you want to drive down into your virtualized environment, and effectively it's handing off to vCenter. vCenter then takes a second logical approach to it and then allocates it down onto the correct resources beneath. So from OpenStack, you are not easily pinning the resource to a particular platform. Okay? Now, you can do things via vCenter to get that, but it's a secondary management effort in the process. Okay? Right. That sadly my little joke picture on the right has been cut off, but that's a man trap. So be careful where you're stepping when you do this. Lots of our customers ask us at proof of concept level to show them that the vCenter integration works. Brutally honest, most people go with KVM because KVM is a very powerful hypervisor and makes a lot of sense on OpenStack. But we are often challenged technically to get their customer proof in their environment that the integration works. And you can run into some pitfalls, okay? So if you've only got one link to vCenter, then you've immediately got a point of weakness in your architecture, okay? Anyone who was in the earlier session when I was speaking, SUSE is all about resilience. It's all about reliability. It's all about 5 nines. It is the business that takes open source and makes it enterprise ready, okay? So we find this a little bit concerning, and we do architect around it. So we've got a little workaround later that helps people. It's not completely supported though, so be careful. Because it's vCenter managing pools of clustered ESXi hypervisors beneath, it kind of goes without saying, you're probably VMware administrators, so you probably know you're going to have to turn on full DRS on your vCenter infrastructure for it to work in its best form, okay? DRS being the ability to dynamically allocate resource according to where pools are available on the ESX level. So that relates very much to one of it. You've got 4 ESXi hosts, one of them becomes constrained on resource, so a VM moves across and actually gets restarted on another host, okay? I mentioned earlier, the API for VMware for OpenStack doesn't expose all the capability in vCenter. So as organizations, you've spent quite a lot of your resources, money, time, etc., getting the benefits of vCenter. And some customers I work with sit there with OpenStack and bang their heads against the desk and think, I haven't got this capability. All the capabilities in vCenter are available, and they actually recommend go across and use vCenter if you want to turn those capabilities on, okay? Kind of makes sense to them because they want you to buy vCenter, so the loop keeps going. Not everything gets exposed up. And this is a weird one. I actually, because of something that was said by VMware on the keynote, I've had a quite detailed conversation about 2 minutes before I came up here with the VMware guys next to us on the stand. SUSE sits next to VMware on the stands at the moment. And in the documentation for Liberty from the OpenStack community, and therefore that's kind of like the canonical source of what the OpenStack view should be for us all, it says that VMware don't support a VM running in a data store under vCenter that's managed solely by vCenter and one next to it that's run or managed by OpenStack, okay? But that's a confusing statement because we've already said that vCenter manages everything that's allocated against that environment from OpenStack. So I had a good conversation with them just now. The reason why it's in the documentation is the upstream API is slightly different to the VMware given API. So it's probably worth making sure you talk to VMware. If you're buying vCenter, they should give you the correct API to allow you to get around that problem of being able to manage. Because it's quite obvious to me that if you've got if we go back to the pets and cattle, in the OpenStack world, people talk to this analogy quite a lot. The idea that web-ready applications are cattle, okay? And traditional IT tend to be pets. The idea being that if a system is delivering a service and it's precious enough to be given a name and to be looked after by you and fed back to health if it's got problems and it's important to you, it's a pet and it should be on a virtualized environment. If the system is delivering a service which is web-based and it's able to act in a web clustered and dynamic way, then it becomes a cattle workload. In other words, if it gets sick, you just kill it and you get another one and put it in its place and deal with it like that. So it's obvious to me that if you've bought vCenter and you're running lots of pets in there, and you invest in OpenStack and you want to utilize some of that vCenter resource, you might want to kind of run a hybrid where you leave the vCenter managed pets next to the OpenStack managed virtual machines. So that kind of makes sense to me. It is possible, apparently, if you use the VMware API. Okay? Importantly, throughout all this conversation, I've maybe confused you by talking about the API going from OpenStack across into, it's called in by Nova, and it goes across to vCenter, okay? From an OpenStack point of view, what can't happen is it loses sight of those virtual machines and resources, if you're using NSX or whatever, the resources that are being used by vCenter. So OpenStack needs to remain the canonical source of proof about where everything's happening, okay, in the OpenStack world. It doesn't care if you're running VMs separately, that's fine. What it needs to do is it's the single version of the truth for all the virtual components. If you confuse that model, what happens is you can see VMs are running in the OpenStack dashboard, Horizon, most people use, but the actual metrics coming back are very confusing. Okay, so that can throw people quite hard. Right, now we get down into the nitty-gritty. What happens when OpenStack hands off the responsibility to vCenter to run that virtual machine is actually the image that you use, so your template that you start VMs off within your cloud needs to reside in Glance. Glance is a Linux service and sits under a Linux file system. But a copy of that needs to go through vCenter and all the way down to your ESXi host, okay? A lot of people run Windows in their VMware environment. They can be quite big images. We've had situations where guys have been out on proof of concepts and taken a 3 gig image and tried to start it on the ESXi, and it's taken 4 hours, okay? Now, there is caching and stuff, and I explain that in a bit, but if you don't understand the handoff of how the copy works, you can't mitigate that effect, okay? So careful, that is a real gotcha. The other thing is they also say that they only support one shared data store. So because they're running clustered ESXi, they recommend, and DRS and everything, then it's a shared data store off a SAN or shared storage, whatever, however you deliver it. And they'll only support the one. So there's some limitation on how expansive you can become with your VMware environment that's linked to OpenStack. Okay. Drilling into it in more detail, I thought an illustration of how that copy takes place would help you get why I'm saying it's such a problem. So up in the OpenStack world, okay, the images reside and they're stored. Now you call a VM, a copy of that moves through the service and then is injected into the shared data store. Then DRS decides where that needs to be started, and then a copy's made to the ESX server, and then it's started. So that's why you get all this delay, so you have to be careful about how you design that and deliver that. Okay? So that's just the statement reinforcing that. It's really important for you to understand that moving it from a Linux-based file system and delivering it onto the data store, it's moving through to VMFS. So you have got challenges about how the image should be stored and how it should move, okay? If you're going to copy it across, I've already said it can be slow. They do actually adopt caching, so that slowness will only be incurred in full on the first time you start a VM from that particular image, okay? So think about it as architects. That's fine if you think, well, I can incur that delay on the first time a VM started on the image. But if that cache is flushed, say you change the image and refresh everything, you're going to incur that delay again. Okay? So if you take this into account, you should think about the format in which you're building your virtual machine image, your template, before you inject it into your Glance repository. Okay? Now, there's an open source tool that QEMU delivers to allow you to do that. I'm not here to advertise for VMware, are a good partner of SUSE. I'm not here to advertise for them. They've got tools, and they are available to you if you've got vCenter, so it should all make life very easy for you. But there is an open source tool to be able to convert your images. The type of image you deliver in dictates how quickly it gets copied up and used at the ESXi level. So take care to follow the instructions on that, because you can really tune it down to get much better performance. Okay? Be careful of the cache prefix variable in nova.conf. I've talked about if you refresh your cache, you're going to incur quite a long delay again. So you should refresh your cache. You should delete it if you're not using it, but don't set the delay time too tight on it, or else you're going to incur the delay more often than you need. Okay? And it's also recommended that you boot the VM as a linked clone, because obviously if you're doing it as a standalone clone, a standalone copy, you'll be incurring it each time. So do it as a linked clone on the ESX level, and you're using some of the elements to get more speed. Okay. From a networking point of view, you've got a couple of choices really, partly because of the fact that Nova wasn't quite as powerful as it is now from an OpenStack point of view. So you kind of got an old method and a new method. You've got Nova networking, which I wouldn't recommend. And there's a description in this slide deck explaining that you only really get a flat network to manage by DHCP using that technique, and you get no isolation between your virtual nodes. So if you're on that network, all VM will be able to see all VM on that particular segment, which isn't ideal when you're trying to use software-defined networking to create security zones and whatever else. So we would recommend that you use OpenStack networking with Nova nowadays. You utilize VLAN Manager within VMware, and you've got a few steps you have to define. So practically, you need to go in and set up a port group for the VLAN and things like that. That's quite obvious, and the documentation is there to help you, but it's a few steps you need to take into account. So these are the kind of things that have tripped us up while we've been on site. We've been sitting there scratching our heads because we've done everything else, and then you're like, forgot to define a VLAN. How stupid am I? And also, these settings are very, very important. So the promiscuous mode to override accept, and your MAC address changes override accept. They're important because the traffic won't flow in a way that will make the different zones or different networks that you define won't actually see each other properly without those settings. Okay? Also, part of the reason why we recommend the second networking technique is the fact that within OpenStack, your security groups, which are effectively a software-defined firewall, aren't available for you to use. Okay, I think I'm going to have to speed up. Right. If you want VNC access into your VMs, you've got to do a change which needs to be bundled into your vSphere installation. Now, your vSphere administrator will understand how to do that, but that needs to be a process you do to get VNC access, which is very useful, so I recommend it. And the account itself, you guess, has to have certain service permissions to be able to work from a security point of view. They are in the documentation. As the version keeps moving forward, it gets augmented. So, you know, I advise you to go to the documentation and check all this. I'm just calling out things which can trip you up. Little extras. People get a bit confused when in Glance they define naming and things like that, and it gets ignored at the VMware level. That's because the API is not perfect, and it will go with a computer-generated name. So if you have gone through and said the instance is defined as this, and it has this name, and it should come out as the VM having that name, you will get thrown that it comes up with just a bit of gibberish. But that's just how it works. You can't really calculate it back. There's a recommended option there if you're using VMware in the nova.conf. So it's a standard of 0 in default, but set the reserved host memory MB to 512 meg. That just frees up the memory in a better way for it to utilize the vCenter capability. There's a couple of other good practices. So remove base images. So don't let if you let your base images gather within your vCenter infrastructure, you can get bloat in effect. So it's good practice to clean it out. And you do that through the remove unused original age seconds. So you can define how long it is before that image becomes stale. Okay? Just a quick advertisement. We are SUSE. We integrate well with VMware. If you don't want to go to one vendor to get these capabilities and you want a pure open source vendor, we work very well with VMware. They're a great partner of ours, and we make it very easy to utilize that technology. Thank you very much. We're getting thrown out. Quick, leave.